Morning.
Morning. Okay, Mr. Chairman, we are now live streaming and we are recording, so I will turn it over to you to start the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome to the virtual MetroPlan Orlando board meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Bob Delari, County Commissioner for Seminole County, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. We have a team of folks working to ensure this meeting runs smoothly. I want to thank them all for their hard work. We're under emergency orders today from both federal and state and local governments are conducting public meetings in a responsible manner due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting has been advertised on the MetroPlan Orlando website and social media, as well through targeted emails and the Orlando Sentinel ad. The virtual meeting is accessible to the public by computer, tablet, or phone. As mentioned, the meeting is also being live streamed on the MetroPlan Orlando YouTube channel. Florida Sunshine Law typically requires a quorum to be physically present in a room for government meetings. However, Governor DeSantis suspended this requirement in an executive order allowing government board meetings to be conducted virtually. I'd like to now ask Mayor Pat Bates to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mayor? Mayor Pat Bates, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? You need to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, we'll have a short video to review the virtual meeting guidelines. This will help the meeting flow smoothly.
Welcome to MetroPlan Orlando's virtual meeting. Here are some things you should know. Board and committee members are active participants, and members of the public are observers. Our chairperson will make sure to keep the meeting flowing. Please keep your microphone or phone line muted unless recognized to speak. Make sure to pay attention to your video controls as well. Participants are welcome to use the raise hand feature to ask questions after presentations. This feature can be found when clicking on the participant's icon. When recognized by the chair to speak, you can unmute yourself. Please make sure to speak clearly so everyone can hear you. You may also submit questions via the chat box by clicking on the chat icon. A moderator will relay your question. Thank you.
And thank you all. So as the video said, if we can keep our microphones muted until recognized to speak, would be greatly appreciated. We'd like to use the raise hands feature to the participants in discussions. There'll be 2 public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who want to speak will use the raise hand features followed by the participation tab. If attended by the phone, you can hit *9 to raise your hand and request to be recognized. When you're called, your microphone will be temporarily unmuted by staff and you'll be asked to state your name and your contact information for the record. We'll also be accepting comments by email or phone messages before the meeting. The guidelines for the public comments are posted on the metroplanorlando.org/virtual meetings. Public comments received before the meetings will be read by the staff at the conclusion of the meetings. We want this and future meetings online to be accessible to all. Participants may join on by the computer, tablet, or phone. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact MetroPlan Orlando. I would, at this time, with everything going on in our community, counties and cities to take this opportunity to ask each one of the mayors or chair people to state or to talk a little bit about emergency matters in their community. I would ask them to be respectful of the time and try to limit their comments to 5 minutes or less. At this time, I'd like to ask Chairman Commissioner Jay Zimbauer to report on Seminole County's activities in participating in COVID-19. Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. So Seminole County, we're doing pretty much what everybody else is doing. Our COVID rates continue to decline as we uptick in our testing. We currently have about 31 testing facilities or sites where folks can get testing. We currently have 2 pop-up testing centers that are taking place. One is at the Altamont Springs Mall. The other is at Seminole State College, Lake Mary campus. We front line of the COVID, as well as getting the economic engine, back in gear and revved back up. We're doing pretty much what everybody is trying to do and accomplish, and getting businesses back to work. The county, we began opening our first phase of public access to our county buildings yesterday. We have erected protective barriers, plexiglass type scenarios through areas where the public must come in contact with the employees in order for them to get their services. We continue to operate our economic development and our community services, as well as our public works, which has not been down at all through this whole unfortunate event that we've all been faced with. We continue to see businesses struggle. We understand that's going to be an impact, on the bottom line with not only our county, but the entire state as a whole in our sister counties. We're working with Mayor Demings, Dyer, Janner through the region, as well as Campione up in Lake County. We're meeting on a weekly basis, and I appreciate Mayor Demings facilitating those calls. We're all sharing information that we share throughout the region to make sure that we're all not stepping on each other's toes. We're trying to each one of our respective communities. As we move forward, as we saw the barbers hair salons have recently opened, we hope that the next phase kicks off relatively soon. We've been, like everybody else, doing Zoom and GoToMeetings. I think the silver lining that a lot of us are going to see in this is that from a government standpoint, I think at least here in Seminole County, we're going to be actually looking at what the real need is for brick and mortar, and the ability to have good response, people working from home or working remotely, and the productivity levels have actually increased what we've seen. So, all in all, we're doing pretty good here in Seminole County. Like everyone else, we're waiting with bated breath to hopefully move on to the next phase and get the economy back in gear. But yet we have to do that safely, looking out for the best interests of the community as a whole. So again, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the collaboration from as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to now ask the Mayor of Orange County, Mayor Demings. Can you report out to us, please?
All right, let me just say good morning to all of you. And here within Orange County, we do remain under a state of emergency. We do have an existing executive order in place that mandates the wearing of masks by employees in certain businesses, and the institution of social distancing consistent with CDC guidelines, and that will continue. At this point, we have about 1,540 different positive cases within Orange County, and that's the highest number within the region itself. We have tested about 40,000 people within Orange County. We have 35 individuals who have died as a result of COVID-19. We have an economic recovery task force that Commissioner Zimbabwe alluded to that is focused on really returning businesses to operations through a phased approach. They are having daily meetings. It does have somewhat of a regional focus as well. We do have multiple sites within Orange County where we're doing testing. The Orange County Convention Center remains a state regional testing facility. They have, in addition to the nasal testing swabs being used at that location, they have also begun antibody testing for first responders or frontline workers here within the region. We are the recipients of about $243 million in Federal CARES Act funding that we are utilizing to work throughout Orange County with our various recovery and response efforts. We have been distributing millions of PPE to small businesses here within the county itself. This week we began the distribution of face masks and hand sanitizer to small businesses, and that has gone well. At this point, I think the last update I received, we had distributed over 20,000 bottles of hand sanitizer and over 500,000 masks to small businesses. And the goal this week is to distribute 1 million plus masks to within our community. And so we're continuing to monitor the cases, and we have overall a positive rate within Orange County of 4%, which of the large urban counties is the lowest positive rate within the state. I think a lot of that is due to the early shutdown of our major theme parks, since we have the nation's largest single site employer, that being Walt Disney, with 77,000 employees. When they made the decision back in mid-March to close the parks and other theme parks closed thereafter, I believe that had a significant impact on stopping the spread, not just here within our region, our state, but really perhaps across the nation. We are seeing at this point businesses preparing to reopen, and we're going to support those efforts. So with that, that's the overall lay of the land for us here within Orange County.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the update. I'd like to now ask Mayor Dyer to report on the City of Orlando. Mayor?
Sorry, it took me a second to get unmuted there.
Okay, Mayor.
We continue to work virtually from City Hall. We went home a little bit before the stop work or stay home orders went into effect, and we'd been working for the last couple of years to provide all of our services virtually anyway. So we have over 300 services you can access, and we actually have more permits being issued in the last month than we did a year ago during this same time frame. So we continue to do business virtually, and we'll do that through the end of the month. And we're looking at all our different services on how we can better provide them, whether they might be better done virtually than in person. With the help of the Orange County Health Department, we have several different testing sites being rotated through the cities directly in our neighborhoods. We've done a few things to accommodate business openings, letting businesses operate in the right of way and in private parking lots, additional signage, using tents without having to get a permit or an application related to that. And otherwise, pretty much the Orange County report is, we're pretty much in sync with them.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate your input. At this time, we'll turn to Osceola County. Commissioner Janer.
Thank you, Chairman Delari. Good morning, everybody. So we are currently remain as well as in a state of emergency with a mandatory face covering ordinance. Otherwise than that, we are following the governor's orders. As of Tuesday, May 12th, we had about 582 cases confirmed of the coronavirus and 15 deaths. With regards to testing, we've tested 8,851 individuals with the 582 confirmed positive, which results in a 7% positive of those being tested. That is on the downward decline. We were as high as 12% at one point. We continue to watch the trends of the demographics of the people that are dominant, and have noted a higher trend in those of Hispanic origin. Testing sites are being provided by both Advent Health and the county's health department, as well as Walmart open a testing site. So with that, also the Department of Health is offering a mobile site that's rotating every 2 to 3 days to various areas of the county to reaching those segments of our population that may not have been able to go to the larger testing sites located farther out. We are also participating in the Orlando Economic Partnership Task Force, as well as Mayor Deming's county leader calls at a regional level. Thank you to Mayor Demings for those calls. They've been very useful as we all kind of work together to mitigate this pandemic. I've also established an Osceola Back to Work task force made up of local government leaders and many small business representatives. Our goal is really to find ways to support their efforts to reopen and identify measures we can assist in building consumer confidence and education that these businesses are following best practices for reopening safely. The county has provided funding for approximately 14 local food pantries to provide food distribution to our residents. We are preparing to distribute a second round of funding to continue to help to provide assistance while many of our residents wait on unemployment benefits. We have also completed one round of rental assistance and will be opening back up applications this coming week. On a brighter note, we received notification that our annual SHIP allocation will increase by 2.7 million over this last year. So that's, I guess, since the Sadowski fund wasn't rated. Our CDBG allocation as a result of the pandemic was 936,000, and it will be spent on rental assistance, mortgage foreclosure prevention, and small business assistance. That's all I have. Thank you, Commissioner Delari, and I apologize for my home phone ringing. Can't put that one on mute.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would like to also extend my thanks to all the elected officials, and not just our region, but our state, and all staff members, including first responders during this time. Is truly unprecedented, and I know that everyone's trying and doing their best. At this time, I would like to recognize the Executive Director of MetroPlan Orlando, Gary Hutman, for some announcements. Gary? Gary Hutman, are you available?
Yes, good morning. I too had a difficult time unmuting myself there. Good morning, Chairman Delari and board members and all those that are attending online this morning. Thank you for being with us during this transition to virtual meetings, and we remain dedicated to having good discussions about transportation planning in Central Florida. We are doing our best in this environment to stay transparent and accessible to the public, and we do appreciate your patience and understanding. As you're all aware by now, these meetings take a lot of planning and teamwork. When Chairman Delari started his comments this morning, you saw a slide that identified the hosts for this morning's meeting. And I believe that we actually have 7 members of our team working directly, but behind the scenes to make this meeting go smoothly. But I got to tell you that Jason Lachavo, Cynthia Lambert, Marianne Horn, and Leilani Via-Oga have all played a big part and have done a great job in making these virtual meetings a success. So thank you to them. We will be sending a survey after this meeting so you can tell us more about your virtual meeting experience and let us know how we could even make these meetings better. As the chair mentioned, we'll be using the raise hand feature to recognize committee members during the meeting and to call on members of the public during the comment time. If you have joined us on the phone only without the video screen, please use *6 to mute and unmute your line. And then please use *9 to raise and lower your virtual hand so that meeting hosts can see that you wish to be recognized. You'll see that there's a chat feature on your toolbar. This communicates with all of the panelists working in this meeting, which includes board members, staff, and the presenters. But please only use this if you are having technical issues and need assistance. A full record of the chat comments will be included with the public record for this meeting. Now I want to give a shout out to MetroPlan's communication team. You know, this happens once or twice a year that we get to come and brag a little bit, but recently Cynthia and her team won 2 image awards, and that is for the best in category. And once again, it's for the Corinne Drive study, and this time for phase 3, for the outreach and for the study video. So congratulations to Cynthia, Marianne, and Leilani for that. This morning we have one alternate member with us, and that is a representative of the Transportation Systems Management and Operations Committee. Alex Laffey is here in place of Doug Jameson from Lynx. So Alex, thanks for taking the time to be here this morning.
No problem, sir.
Since our last meeting, there's been a best foot forward enforcement in Orange and Osceola County, and I'd like to just report that 5 agencies participated in that. It was conducted on March 11th and 12th. There were 17 crosswalks that were enforced and 189 warnings and citations were issued. The MPOAC Institute, you may recall, some of you were considering signing up for that. Well, that was canceled, the March and April sessions of the MPOAC Institute. There was some talk originally about trying to schedule a meeting for later this year. I don't anticipate that happening, but we'll certainly keep you informed if it does. I also spent some time talking about the Transplex program, which is the statewide transportation, excuse me, and planning exchange that was to be held here in Orlando on April 20th and 22nd. That did not happen either, but in its place was a series of 16 webinars, and all of those happened on April 21st. I participated in a session on transportation equity, having to do with workforce transportation and the needs of transportation disadvantaged, those less fortunate than us. Other participants on that panel included Eric Gray from United Against Poverty and Frankie Elliott from the Orlando Regional Realtor Association. Eric Hill from MetroPlan staff also participated in a session entitled "Are We There Yet?" and that was on connected and autonomous vehicles. There was to have been a NARC annual conference coming up on June 7th through the 10th in Detroit. That meeting is canceled. I received word just last week that in its place, NARC is planning to do a 2-day webinar series that's set for June 8th and 9th. So still during that window of time, but it's a 2-day webinar series. I hope to take part in that and in fact have registered and will hopefully report out something to the board on at our June 10th meeting. The Build grant opportunity is coming up. The due date for that is Monday, May 18th. And I wanted to let you know that I have provided a letter of support for the Osceola County Neptune Road application. A copy of that letter is included in your packages this morning under tab 4. I've also provided a letter of support for the Seminole County Build Grant application for the State Road 426, County Road 419 Phase 3 project. That letter is not included in your package this morning just because of timing, but it will be provided to you next month for your information. Additional letters that have been provided include one for the OUC application for charging stations. These are to be placed on Robinson Street in the downtown Orlando area, as well as on Americana Boulevard near the Millennium Mall. And this is part of the VW settlement. Copies of the both of those letters, the Seminole Build Grant application and the OUC application for charging stations, will be included next month in your agenda packages. And speaking of charging stations, our parking garage just opened 2 new ones located on the lower level near the Church Street entrance. They're with a company called Cip Connect. And there is an app, I understand, that can be downloaded, or you can get a Cip Connect card to use those new stations. Last Friday, Governor DeSantis signed Executive Order 114 that effectively extended by 60 days his approval of organizations like ours to conduct business by having these virtual meetings. It essentially suspends the requirement to have a quorum physically present in a defined location. So that will take us up to just about our July board meeting, unless something, at least the permission to have these virtual meetings will take us up to just about our July board meeting. Staff is working on some statistics that may be of interest to you that are associated with COVID-19, and we hope to provide those next month. And those will include statistics on crashes and safety, traffic impacts that we're experiencing regionally, and some reports on air quality. Chairman DeLaurie, that completes my announcements this morning, but I would like to turn it over to Cynthia Lambert, our public information. She will be calling the roll so we can confirm a quorum for the meeting.
Thank you, Gary. All right, good morning, everybody. So if you could go ahead and unmute yourselves in preparation for the roll call, that would be wonderful. And then you can go on mute again once I've called your name. I'll be coming to those of you with last names at the beginning of the alphabet first. If you are on the phone, you can unmute with *6, just as a reminder. And if you are on a computer or a tablet, that unmute button will be down on the left side of your bottom toolbar. Okay, I will call attendance for our voting members first. Mayor Jose Alvarez.
Here.
Commissioner Brandon Arrington.
Present.
Mayor Pat Bates.
Here.
Commissioner Emily Bonilla. Commissioner Bob DeLaurie.
Here.
Mayor Jerry Demings.
Present.
Mayor Buddy Dyer.
Here.
Mr. Carson Good. I thought I saw him, Mr. Good.
Carson, wake up. I guess here.
Okay. Commissioner Shell Grebe.
Here.
Commissioner Viviana Jeaner.
Here.
I think
Mayor-
this is an IQ test.
Mayor Dale McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Christine Moore.
Here.
Mayor Brian Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Tony Ortiz.
Here.
Commissioner Victoria Siplin.
Present.
Mr. Stephen Smith.
Present.
Mayor Jeff Triplett.
Oh, I'm here.
Commissioner Myra Uribe.
Present.
Commissioner Betsy Vanderlei.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Zembauer.
Present.
And I'll also call the roll for our non-voting advisor, District Secretary Jared Perdue.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Tom Cap,
I'm here.
Miss Sarah El Badri,
Here.
thank you. Mr. Alex Laffey,
Present.
Mr. Nabil Muhaisen,
Present.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum, and I will turn it back over to Gary for agenda review.
Chairman Delory, I would like to get two amendments to the agenda this morning. The first one is an item that came to us after the agenda went out, and this is an item that does have a deadline, and we'd like to be helpful and meet that deadline. It's to support Sunrail's application to the Federal Railroad Administration. So I would like to get a motion to amend the consent agenda to add item Roman numeral 8H. This is for approval of the chair's signature on behalf of the board on the letter of support for the Sunrail FRA grant application. You all received a copy of that letter by email last Thursday. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get a motion to amend the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, you need to tell us your name before you make.
Dale McDonald, second. Or motion.
Uribe moved.
Okay, do we have Kathy? Did you hear who made the motion in a second?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Having no dissenting votes, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you for that. Now I'd like to get an amendment to delete an item, and this item is Roman numeral 10H, which is in the acknowledgement of the build grant letter of support for the city of Orlando. I received word just the other day that the city will not be submitting that particular application, but will be submitting another application in partnership with Orange County. And I will be providing a letter of support for that as well. But for the time being, that letter found under Roman numeral 10H should be deleted from this morning's agenda. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get a motion to delete item Roman numeral 10H.
Do we have a motion?
Chairman Delory, motion to remove.
Second.
Okay. Kathy, you have both people who made the motion in a second?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing no dissenting votes, the motion passes.
Okay, Chairman Delory, there are no further changes to the agenda, and we're ready to proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate everyone's patience on this virtual meeting. We'll now move into committee reports. First, move into the Municipal Advisory Committee. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. The Municipal Advisory Committee met virtually May 7th. We approved our minutes from the February 6th Municipal Advisory Committee meeting and recommended approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2019, 2020 through 23-24 TIP, all that in one breath. We recommended we received 3 presentations: the 2045 MTP status update and report on scenario planning, which I found particularly interesting. A presentation on bike crash technology or typology, and a presentation on the I-4 Ultimate project. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 4th, 2020, and this concludes my report blessedly.
Thank you. We'll now move on. Is there any questions for the Municipal Advisory Committee?
I see
Seeing
that
none, we'll
Mayor
move on.
Deming's hand is up, Mr. Chairman. He's got his hand up in the participant list.
Mayor Demings?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question regarding a point of clarity. I know that we took a couple of motions a few moments ago regarding the consent agenda, and I thought one motion was to remove one item, and then the second motion was to remove the second item. Was there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Not at this
As
time.
all.
We're going to be getting to that later on in the agenda.
Okay.
Anyone else have any comments? Cynthia?
No, Mr. Speaker, no one else has their hand up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the Community Advisory Committee.
The community Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Aldaji with the Community Advisory Committee. We met on April 22nd. We were actually the first advisory committee of MetroPlan to meet virtually. Big thank you to MetroPlan staff for making that transition so smoothly so we can continue conducting business. Members recommended support for the Florida Department of Transportation's amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program after much discussion and additional input from Lynx officials on whether the buses included in the amendment were electric. The Community Advisory Committee wants to urge Lynx to move swiftly toward electric technology, and it wants to hear more soon from Lynx about its future energy and purchasing plans. We're expecting more information on these topics during our next cycle of meetings. Members also heard updates on the 2045 MTP, bicycle crash typology, and the I-4 Ultimate project. Committee members asked several questions about the I-4 project pertaining to cost overruns and accidents. Another particular concern was controlling noise levels and especially air quality for residents of the Griffin Park neighborhood near the 408 exchange. Any residents that live near major highways that will experience increasing automobile emissions due to improvements. The committee would appreciate more updates from FDOT about these issues and more information about traffic volumes and health and safety concerns related to construction. Our next meeting will be May 27th when CAC will kick off again the next cycle of virtual meetings for committees. That's all I have to report, sir.
Thank you. Any questions for the Community Advisory Committee? Cynthia, we have any hands raised?
No, we don't, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
We'll now move on to Technical Advisory Committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The Technical Advisory Committee met back on April 24th. We recommended approval of the TIP amendment requested on today's agenda. We have also heard presentations on the 2045 MTP scenario planning efforts, as well as another presentation on bike crash typology. And the last presentation we heard was on the I-4 Ultimate projects, where again, there was many questions. In a nutshell, the results was that the improvement that has been made so far has resulted into quite a bit of improvement on the travel volume and capacity of the lanes that have been open to the public. Our next meeting will be on May 29th, and this will conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the Technical Advisory Committee? Cynthia, do we have any hands?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll now move on to the Transportation System Management and Operations Committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I had a technical difficulty there.
It's quite all right.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The TSMO committee met on April 24th, 2020. That was also a virtual meeting. We approved the February 28th, 2020 TSMO meeting minutes. We approved the staff recommendation to amend the fiscal year 2019 2020 through 2023-24 TIP to include a Lynx project, the Southwest Orlando Bicycle and Ped Study, an access management project on SR 50, traffic signals at US 441 and Clarkona Ocoee Road, and an interchange modification at I-4 and County Road 532. Information on these projects is included in our agenda package. Also, we approved 2 items related to our traffic signal retiming program. These include the recommendation of the Signal Retiming Ad Hoc Committee to have MetroPlan Orlando staff continue the management of the traffic signal retiming program, and the formation and approval of a traffic signal retiming task force of committee members to assist in the procurement and management of the new traffic signal retiming contract. And with that, we have 2 meetings scheduled for June to provide a short list and then choose final contractors for that. We also had 2 presentations in our last meeting. The first one was Ms. Simone Babb with Metric Engineering, who gave a presentation on connected automated vehicle training that will be used in workforce training and development for this emerging technology. The second one was Mr. Pete Costello. He is the president and chairman of the Board of Intelligent Transportation Society of Florida, ITSFL. He provided an overview of the organization, a perspective on the current state of technology in transportation, and opportunities for TISMO committee members to participate in ITS Florida. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the Transportation System Advisory and Operations Committee? Cynthia, any hands raised?
No, sir.
Okay, great. We'll now move on to public comments on action items. Do we have anyone that wants to speak on this action items? If so, please use the raise hands function found in the bottom of your screen or press *9 on your phone keypad. When you're called on, the host will unmute your microphone. You'll see a button pop up that says that the host wants you to unmute you. Please accept this prompt. So it's activate your microphone. We'll ask that you provide your name and address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes or less. At this time, Cynthia, do we have anyone in the queue wanting to speak?
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone, but maybe we could give them just a few seconds. So if you're watching this meeting as a member of the public, please go ahead and use the raise hands feature if you would like to make a comment on any of our action items on the agenda. There will be another public comment section toward the end of the agenda as well.
And Cynthia, do we have any written comments or phone comments that have been submitted pertinent to the action items?
We have not received any comments before the meeting, Mr. Chairman, and I don't see anyone with their hands raised right now. So I think we are ready to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move forward. Now we'll move forward on action items. After each action item, we'll ask for a motion and a second. Please state your name for the record, making the motion in a second, and then we'll have a discussion. We're ready for a vote. We'll ask you to unmute your microphones, and then we'll take a vote on the motion. If there's any questions, please use the raise hand feature, which is found as an option under the participant tab at the bottom of your screen. When you're recognized, you can unmute yourself and speak. If you're having audio issues, you may also submit your questions via the chat button at the bottom of the window, and the moderator will relay your question. Our first item for action will be the consent agenda. We did make modifications in the beginning of the meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Motion to accept, Janer.
Second, Vanderlei.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. First, do we have any raised hands, Cynthia?
No, we don't. Thank you.
At this time, we'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, sign. Seeing no dissenting votes, the motion passes. Thank you. We do have two action items today. The next item is the FDOT amendment for fiscal year 2019-20 and 2023/24 Transportation Improvement Plan, the TIP. This time we'll hear from staff.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The TIP amendment that we have this morning includes 5 projects which are applied there, and we'd also included the information in your agenda packets. I did want to point out that we had gotten some conflicting information on the Lynx bus project, and in the original fact sheet that was included in your packets, it said that these buses would be compressed natural gas, but we got confirmation from Lynx staff last week that they're actually purchasing 6 electric buses along with the charging facilities. So, and there was a corrected fact sheet that was sent out later last week. So with that, unless questions, we're asking for your approval of the amendment with that correction.
Okay. Questions from the board? Cynthia, do we have any raised hands?
I do not see any raised hands at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I would like to thank the advisory board for bringing that to our attention so that we were able to get the information quickly dispersed to the board members. So thank you for your hard work on that. At this time, do we have a motion for the TIP amendment?
So moved, Vanderlei.
Second, Zipline.
Okay. Any questions? Cynthia, do we have any raised hands?
No raised hands.
Okay. This time we'll call the vote. I believe this is a roll call vote.
Yes, it is. Okay, we'll call the roll. Mayor Alvarez. Don't forget to unmute yourselves. Mayor Alvarez.
Leave it on. It's okay.
Okay. Commissioner Arrington.
Aye.
Mayor Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Delary.
Yes.
Mayor Demmings.
Aye.
Mayor Dyer.
Yes.
Mr. Good.
Yes.
Commissioner Grebe.
Yes.
Commissioner Janer.
Yes.
Mayor McDonald.
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Mayor Nelson.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Commissioner Ciplan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Triplett.
Yes.
Commissioner Udibe. Commissioner Udibe. Okay, Commissioner Vanderlei.
Yes.
Yes. Uribe's here. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Zembauer.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll move on to the approval of the FY 2021, FY 21-22 UPWP. This time we have from staff.
Good morning. This is Nick Lepp from MetroPlan, here to present our UPWP, which is our 2-year budget for MetroPlan and our staff, what we'll be working on over the next 2 years. What I have in front of you here is just an estimate of our estimated revenue that we're going to have versus what we had last year. As you can see, we have a little bit more coming with us this year, a little bit in extra local, state, and federal funds coming this way to do our work. Next slide. Next slide, please. There we go. So our current section, right, UPWP has 8 sections with 24 tasks. What we were trying to do with this next budget is consolidate those into something that was a little bit more of the work that we were doing. What you'll see on the next slide is we've managed to consolidate that into 3 sections with 14 different tasks, really combining a lot of that systems planning work that we were doing that included bike ped planning, transit planning, all of that as separate tasks or sections within. Now we have it all in one for transportation planning activities, which represents more of that work that we do outside of the silo and more of a collective multimodal transportation. We've already presented the draft to you and submitted it to FDOT, FTA, and FHWA, and we received some comments and we've addressed those, which are on the next slide. One of the main things that we received is we needed to add a little bit more information on the use of consultants, but what we've decided to do is we get our scopes and our work approved by FDOT and FHWA prior to issuing the task work order. So we've just added that language within the UPWP so everybody's aware that the scopes will be reviewed and approved prior to work commencing. The other thing I would like to highlight is we had a new task in there for local agency program, LAP work. We've removed the language from the UPWP right now because we are not currently LAP certified, but we left it in there as a placeholder because we still intend to pursue this work to assist our local governments with implementing projects. Go to the next slide. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on our Unified Planning Work Program, but I'm looking for approval.
Thank you. Questions from the board to staff? Cynthia, do we have any hands raised?
We do not, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just remind everyone that you can find that button if you click on participants. The raise hands button is down at the bottom of that box.
Okay. So having no raised hands, no questions, we'll call, ask for a motion.
Motion from McDonald.
Second, Vanderlei.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any discussion? Do we have any hands raised? Yeah.
No, we don't.
Okay, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing no pending votes, the vote passes, or the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll move on to the action items for information for acknowledgement. It's in tab 10. We have a motion to accept.
So moved, Vanderlei.
Second, you read it.
Gainer.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Cynthia, do we have any hands raised?
We don't, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
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 Like sign.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I've been having problems getting in until right now. I was able to get back in there.
Okay.
Jose meant to say aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing no dissenting votes, the motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to presentations. We have 3 presentations today. Please use your raised hands to be recognized if you'd like to ask questions. You may raise your hand during the presentation to indicate you have a question. But we will hold all questions to the end of the presentation. If you have any audio issues, you can type in your questions in the chat box and the moderator will relay the question. At this time, we'll go to presentation A, which is the 2045 MPT scenario planning.
Great. Good morning, Chairman Dolari, members of the board. Today, like I have for the, sorry about the dogs, FedEx is delivered. I am going to provide a little status update on where we're at and where we're going to go with scenario planning as part of the planning process. As we've talked about before, we kicked off the scenario, the Metropolitan Plan about 6 months ago, moved through existing conditions, data background, presented and came to consensus on goals and objectives 2 months ago. And now we're really in the heart of our technical analysis, which includes scenario planning and needs assessment. And just as a reminder, we will be asking for your approval or adoption of the 2045 plan later this year in December. But let me dive right into the core content of today's presentation, which is scenario planning. So in the next slide, so scenario planning is ultimately about considering a range of alternative futures that Central Florida may face through 2045 and really attempting to understand the implication of those futures within our long-range metropolitan planning process. So why scenario planning? And this slide provides a quick overview of the concept of scenario planning, which is a technique that MPOs and other planning agencies, local governments included, use to plan for the future and really alternative futures. Traditionally, we would use existing population, employment, and development trends, their rates of growth over the past several years, and we would extrapolate those out. And we tended to assume that travel patterns and destinations that we traveled to would be relatively the same. And we just looked at the impacts over those trends over a longer period of time. So in our case, it was 20 years into the future. And that's how we've done long-range plans in the past. But this plan and our approach that I'm discussing today, which I believe is so relative given our current circumstances, is about trying to better understand changes, the risks and disruptions that we may be facing, and how they'll impact our plan and investment and how we invest. And it also helps us look at the types of strategies we're pursuing to ultimately accomplish our regional goals and objectives that we've come to consensus on. And you've heard me say this before, but scenario planning is really about asking ourselves what if and then what. And that's what we'll talk about today. So next slide, please. So this slide here, it really provides an overview of the general process that we're going to be using for the 2045 plan, starting with where are we today? And that takes the work that we've already conducted in the existing conditions and origin and destination analyses, tasks that and we're going to use that information really as a baseline. So based on that information, it allows us to look at where could we be going. So, what are the signs of change, different inflection points we may be facing, and then based on those assumptions, what happens with the economy, what happens with technology, for example, what are some of those plausible futures we may be facing as a region. That leads us into the next step, which is how do we prepare? So based on those different assumptions about the future, what does that imply about the impacts of moving people and goods, people and freight? So on where we may need to be investing and on what types of strategies should we be pursuing? Ultimately, that leads us to our final step is what is our best path forward? So at the end of the day, we are coming up with strategies and priority projects for the Metropolitan Plan like we always have. But the key difference here is that we are trying to be much more far-sighted, yet still looking at feasibility on the types of strategies that are going to be most successful across the full range of alternative futures, so we can be more prepared for some of the risks and uncertainties that we face, no matter what our future has in store for us. Go to the next slide, please. So this slide looks at really the key drivers of change. And as we know, there's an endless range of factors that impact our daily lives. But for this long-range planning process, we're really going to be considering 6 key drivers of change, and then some of the possibilities in each of these areas for the future. These include population, economy, visitation, development and land use, technology, and climate. Later in my presentation, I will go over each of these key drivers in more detail and how they impact and interrelate in each of the scenarios that we're going to be talking about. With all that being said, I'm going to move on to the scenario framework and discuss how we really pulled together assumptions from these different drivers together to form 4 alternative futures to help guide the planning and needs assessment process moving forward. So we initiated this planning process, about 4 months ago with 4 alternative futures that we developed and vetted with our 2045 MTP working group. The first is traditional trends, and this scenario looks at where we would go if we continued on our historic course. So this scenario would be our traditional approach to long-range planning if we did not utilize a scenario planning process. The next 3 scenarios, global growth, tech transformations, and finally, climate consequences, really allow us to ask those what-if questions and take a more robust look at alternative outlooks. So, we started with 4, but given our current circumstances and following the presentation and discussions with our advisory committees over the past 3 weeks, we're actually preparing an additional scenario titled Disruption Dilemmas, and I'll introduce you to that scenario a little later on in my presentation. But looking here at our traditional trends, this scenario implies really the continuation of pre-COVID-19 trends, our historic patterns. And as we look at the key drivers of change, population is expected to grow at about 1 million new residents by 2045. That's a 40% increase. That's using the Bieber medium forecast. The scenario assumes steady growth in existing core industries like tourism and our service hospitality functions. Visitation and tourism is on trend for this scenario, with major tourism activity centers remaining primarily the same, with new attractions popping up as we've continued to see over the past decade. In regards to technology, state and federal guidance suggests that 40% of the fleet will be connected and about 50% of the fleet will have level 2 automation by 2045. These are really conservative estimates that we're going to be looking at for this technology trend, which is partial driving assistance. So this level of automation falls short of self-driving, where the human is still behind the driver's seat and steering wheel and can take control of the car at any time. So we're not gaining some of the benefits as full automation as it regards to safety and efficiency within this scenario. This scenario also assumes the continuation of existing land use and development patterns. So some infill, but still building out in our more rural areas into more, suburban concentrations. As we look at climate, we're going to see minor increases in technology, or rather in temperature, and moderate sea level rise in coastal areas. As it relates to transportation, this scenario, traditional trends, assumes that the region remains automobile centric with moderate increases in transit and bicycle and pedestrian activity. So that's our trend scenario. As we look to global growth, our second scenario, population is similar to current trends, though the composition of that population is going to be, of those residents, is going to be different, with this scenario looking at a much more diverse, with a larger international presence. Economic growth is assumed to be much higher in this scenario, due in part to the growth in manufacturing and logistics industries, although there will still be major emphasis on those existing core industries like tourism and research and development. Visitation is also expected to grow at a higher rate than our trend scenario, for both domestic and international visitors. And based on that economic diversity and manufacturing, our region will gain multiple new distribution centers within the 3-county area, as well as in Lake and Polk counties where they're traditionally being located. And this will certainly impact how freight and goods are transported around and through our region, still predominantly reliant on, truck, tractor trailers, those rubber tire vehicles, but we will see some change in distribution there. So with that increased freight activity, it will be supported by fully automated freight vehicles, and also pertaining to technology, we're assuming that 85% of the fleet is connected, with as much of 30% of the fleet, if we can go back one slide, please, 30% of the fleet actually being automated at that level 5. So for this global growth, climate characteristics will remain constant with trends. In transportation, the region is still going to remain auto-centric, with moderate increases in transit, bike ped activities, though, as I mentioned before, freight volumes are expected to increase. This scenario really emphasizes and focuses on global freight and global tourism, with a big push on manufacturing within the economy. So let's go to the next slide. Thanks. So this is our tech transformation scenario. And this scenario is really our region taking advantage of and really embracing available transportation innovations, and what that can mean, and how that will impact our other key drivers. Population growth rate is similar to the first 2 scenarios, but the composition is really what's going to change here. So for this scenario, we're going to see a younger population, 18 to 34. That's our young professional cohort. We'll see a higher growth rate in, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But we're seeing a higher economic growth compared to the baseline, and rather focused in this scenario on freight and logistics. This scenario focuses on more high-tech industries like aerospace, research development, and simulation, which will draw that younger professional cohort. For this scenario, we're expecting an increase in the number of visitors. However, rather than the traditional visitor mix composition, we're looking at a greater emphasis on business travel, a lot of that relating to those new key industries, with Central Florida becoming even a more even greater destination for doing business. In regards to technology for this scenario, vehicle miles traveled by automated vehicles is higher than the baseline, with emphasis on what is called automated vehicle subscription services. So similar to an Uber or Lyft, where you summon your automated ride to come pick you up instead of individual vehicle ownership. So we're looking at an ownership model change here. So we're looking at a future where people own fewer cars. So maybe instead of owning 2 cars per household, it's just 1, and then other trips are made using automated services. Subscription services, rather. So we envision investments. We also envision investments in automated transit vehicles, which will support the efficiency of the mass transportation, the transit system. Into other terms of transportation, we're expecting really a wide range of mobility options within this scenario to be available. Some of which that we already have in place, like micro mobility, things like bike share and e-scooter share. Some of which could be coming sooner than later. Think high speed rail, connecting our state's mega regions, and then some that are just still, highly conceptualized and may never happen, but we're still going to talk about the possibilities with those. This type of technological advancement is really suspected to have major impacts on development and land use, especially housing location decision making. So, if you're stuck in traffic, or if you're not stuck in traffic, or you can do other things in commute legally, keyword, you may be willing to live farther from your work location, or as we're experiencing today, your home may also be your work location in the future. And similar to the other scenarios, as it relates to climate characteristics, they will remain constant with current trends for this particular scenario. As we move to the next scenario, what we're calling climate consequences, this is our fourth scenario. And despite the kind of the ominous title here, this is really our high population growth scenario. So for this scenario, we're expecting more dramatic sea level rise than the previous scenarios, which we forecast will actually force populations from coastal areas and from the Caribbean into more inland areas. We call this in-migration. So this will result in a higher population growth rate, about 60%. The past three scenarios, we were looking at about a 40% growth. So this is about 60%. So that's another 200,000 to 400,000 residents in Central Florida by 2045. This scenario also has strong economic growth, but it's really going to be focused on construction and reconstruction due to the climate impacts and the increased need for housing and other associated retail and commercial services with that surge in population. We're also expecting an increase in domestic and international tourism in this scenario, which further increases our reliance on the service and hospitality industries. The population growth will also support denser development along existing corridors, but we also have to acknowledge, based on for affordable housing, some of that population and residential growth will still be in our outer lying areas. For this baseline scenario, we're seeing the region embrace automated vehicle technology, and we're expecting about a quarter of all vehicle miles traveled in the region to be fully automated. So as we envision transportation investment, we're making it more resilient to climate impacts that we have to acknowledge that will come at a cost. Building infrastructure will be more expensive to be resilient to these temperature and water impacts. Although based on that forecasted population growth and that induced denser development, we're expecting to see increases in transit ridership, also in bicycle and pedestrian activities. So this will facilitate and actually be more supportive of a more robust and comprehensive mass transportation system. So we're going to move on to the next slide. And during our committee presentations, we actually used interactive polling to gauge the support for each of the scenarios presented. We asked members how plausible are these scenarios after I introduced each of them. And we acknowledged the challenge and the uncertainty of predicting the future, although this slide really summarizes the polling results. As you can see across the board, no one was for sure about the future, but when we applied weighting, some really simple 1, 2, 3 weighting to the findings, the committees believe that the tech transformation scenario is actually the most likely to occur, followed by the trend in the climate consequences scenario, with the global growth scenario really looking least likely to occur based on the advisory committee polling results. So we can move on to the next slide. So as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we also received feedback, given our current circumstances, given the current times that we're experiencing. We prepared a new scenario, an additional scenario. And that's what we're putting together today. And we just threw this together, based on the feedback that we received from the citizens group, TAC, and as well as questions asked by our municipal advisory committee. And this slide really summarizes the premise and feedback we heard, and more so the impacts that we're actually seeing today. And those include people working more remotely. You know, some of our, comments made earlier today about virtual meeting, kind of that, as we look forward to the future, the challenge of, or the implications of brick and mortar, will that continue to be the same? We are being productive and continuing to work, through these challenging times. Based on that, we're going to see lesser density development patterns continue. A lot of people are ordering online. E-commerce is surging. I'm seeing a lot of FedEx and UPS trucks, come through my neighborhood. So we're going to see more of that, and as that relates to distribution centers, making sure that we can have that quick turnaround. And also, as it's been discussed, that reshoring of supply chains. So that's maybe possibly bringing manufacturing back to our origin country. So more manufacturing occurring in the United States, which would allow more manufacturing and distribution to occur within the state of Florida. And also that what we're seeing in transit ridership, some of those anxieties across the board for all modes of transportation, rather than, or just, which we're going to see actually an increase in the reliance on the single occupant vehicle, or a continuation of that reliance, given some of the concerns and anxiety over shared mobility. So this is a scenario that we put together, based on that, which I think it actually allows us to have a more comprehensive scenario planning process, which, allows us to have a trend scenario, a high growth scenario, that climate consequences, a lower growth scenario, this particular one, and then a technology forward future, or tech transformation. So I think this is actually, allows us to kind of take a more robust look, rather than just thinking kind of on the up and up. So we also, if we can go to the next slide, we also did some polling about with our committees on how they believe we should actually consider the scenario planning in our metropolitan long range planning process. So this slide summarizes that feedback, and committee feedback suggests that we should use the scenarios in identifying and prioritizing needs to really better understand the risks in developing mitigation strategies. So this is really good news, because it really aligns with how federal and other state of the practice guidance recommends. So that's really in tune with, how the textbooks are saying that we should utilize scenario planning in our long range process here. So my last slide, and I acknowledge that I've covered a lot of ground today, and I just wanted to leave you with a couple questions to think about, and if desire to share some of your thoughts. And that really is, how will travel change? We've made some assumptions and we have some ideas, but we would like to hear your thoughts today or in the future. How are key factors impacting transportation services, supply and demand? And then, again, kind of responding to committee feedback, what is our best way of incorporating this type of information within our 2045 long range plan? So with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. I appreciate your time, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Alex. At this time, Cynthia, do we have any hands raised?
We don't right now, Mr. Chairman. Maybe we could give everyone just a few moments in case they do.
One thing I will ask of our staff is that I want to make sure that we take every possible opportunity to get input from the MetroPlan board members. So at the next meeting, I want to make sure that we put this on the agenda at the end to make sure that if they have time to think about it. So at the next meeting, we'll go back and actually make sure that they have any questions or any comments. So if we don't have any today, I want to make sure.
Mr. Chairman, sorry,
Yes.
We have a comment from Commissioner Janer.
Commissioner Janer.
Yes, hi, thank you. Let me lower that hand here first. Yeah, first of all, excellent presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's great if we can have some time to digest this presentation and maybe come back to it briefly in case anybody has any questions. I certainly appreciate the presentation. It was well done. I also wanted to share that Mayor Alvarez asked me to let everybody know that he had internet connectivity issues. I'm reading his message, and that he had to sign off of the meeting because he was having internet problems. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else?
No one
Cynthia.
else has their hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you. Appreciate staff's input. At this time, move on to the next item, which would be the bicycle crash. Hear from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. This presentation is kind of an introductory presentation for a deeper dive, which you'll get in the July meeting. To give you a good background on how bicyclist crashes happen. Many of you have seen this type of information, but there are also new members, both of the board and many of our committees, which is why I'm bringing out this introductory presentation. The bicyclist crash typology has been around for quite some time. What it is, it's a method for categorizing bicyclist crashes by motorist and bicyclist behavior. In the crash reports, there are crash types that are commonly used for motorist versus motorist crashes, but bicyclists and pedestrians as well are much more variable in their movements, and so there are many more ways in which they can get into trouble. And hence, that's why we have this process. And it allows us to select the best countermeasures, based on the behaviors that are happening, and have a better understanding of how it works. This process has been around, like I say, for quite some time, since the 1970s when it was first developed. It was expanded upon in the 1990s by Federal Highway, as well as adding in a pedestrian crash typology. We've been doing these studies since the mid-90s, and now we have it ongoing through the Signal 4 crash database system, so that we're up to date to within a couple of months. The data that I'm showing you this morning is from 2011 through 2017 and includes all 3 counties and all the bike versus motorist crashes. So to start off with, when we look at crashes overall, and this is you'll be seeing repeats of this slide with different crash types. We're going to show you the position of the bicyclist and how many occur in the various positions. You can see here that about a third of the 5,000 total crashes involve travel lane cyclists, about 2/3 involve sidewalk riders, and the percent that are serious and fatal and that happen at night. So you can see here about 2% of crashes overall are fatal and about 1/4 at night. The first specific crash type is the overtaking crash. And this is broken down into 3 subtypes. The majority involve a motorist misjudging the passing clearance and kind of sideswiping the cyclist. Another major type is an undetected cyclist who's riding at night, usually without lights or reflectors. And then there are other crashes where the motorist is drifting into the path of the cyclist and it's more of a direct collision. You can see here that the majority of these are happening in travel lanes. These do tend to be a higher potential for fatalities, although you may recall from a presentation I did last year that most of those fatalities happen on higher speed roads, and also the great majority or a significant portion of them happen at night at 50%. The next crash type is called the right hook, and here what happens is the motorist is passing the cyclist, or in some cases the bicyclist is passing the motorist, and the motorist makes a right turn across the path of the cyclist. About 5% of crashes overall. You can see here that they're more likely to occur on sidewalk position rather than for travel lane or bike lane, and comparable in the manner of fatalities and darkness. Although when a large truck is involved, these tend to be very serious crashes. The next crash is the left cross, where a motorist makes a left turn in front of an oncoming bicyclist. In some cases, the cyclist is screened by either something between the sidewalk and the roadway, or screened by moving vehicles on the road. In other cases, they are passing stopped moving vehicles. That would be the queue jump. But in the majority, the bicyclist is not screened in any way. Also, predominantly a sidewalk crash, and also quite a few for travel lane. And again, similar in the percentage and the relative fatalities. Next is the drive out, and this is first looking just at bicyclists going with the flow of traffic. You can see here about 6% of crashes overall, and these are spread across intersections with signals or stop signs, as well as with drivers coming out of driveways. But then when we move to bicyclists going against the flow of traffic, we see that we have a much bigger number, a third of all crashes involving these sidewalk riders going against flow of traffic. Now, it's important to understand that a bicyclist on a sidewalk has the same rights and duties as a pedestrian, while a bicyclist on the roadway has the same rights and duties as a driver. So we move to the next crash type, which is bicyclists facing traffic on the roadway. And here we see about 6% of crashes involving that. And they tend to be a bit more severe, probably because of faster bicyclist speeds. And then the last significant type is the bicyclist failure to yield, either coming out from a traffic signal or stop sign or from a mid-block location. About 17% of all crashes here, and these account for a significant proportion of our fatalities as well, and a little bit higher likelihood at night. Now, I know there's a lot of data in here. We're going to share this presentation with you so that you have it handy for a reference for the July presentation, which gets into the relative risks of being on a sidewalk, a bike lane, or a travel lane. Now, to pull all these crash types together and kind of put them into context, if we look at this pie chart here, you see everything that's in the yellow to brown range are the motorist-caused crashes, and the blue range are the cyclist-caused crashes. And of course, we always have a number that we can't either determine or that are unusual. So this is for all injury levels for crashes. And as we move up into the injury severity, here looking at the combination of fatal and serious, we see now a greater proportion involve cyclist-caused crashes and a greater proportion involving overtaking motorists. And then similarly, again, when we move up to fatal only, now half of the fatals are bicyclist-caused crashes and about 20% are overtaking motorists. So next month, I'm going to be, or actually it will be in July, I'll be showing you risk analysis based information based on bicyclist counts. We've got the exposure data from sidewalk, bike lane, and travel lane usage. And so we'll be able to actually compare that relative risk based on the number of crashes and by the crash type. And we should be getting a slide to advance here in a second. So bear with me. All right, so we'll also be identifying the most important crash factors overall. And you may be familiar with the concept of safety in numbers, and the data that we have has some insights into why that occurs. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll ask the board if they have any questions for staff. Give them a minute. Cynthia, do we have any raised hands?
I don't see any raised hands in the box, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. How about any written?
No, nothing in the chat box.
Okay, seeing no raised hands, we'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you. The next presentation is the I-4 Ultimate Update. We have a Florida Department of Transportation staff member, John Taylor. Mr. Taylor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Again, my name is John Tyler. I'm the construction engineer for FDOT's District 5. I'm responsible for the oversight of all construction projects for District 5, and that includes I-4 Ultimate. Joining me today is Interim District Secretary Jared Perdue, as well as Anna Taylor. She is FDOT's liaison to MetroPlan Orlando. And we are glad to be here this morning to give you an update on I-4 Ultimate, the largest construction project that FDOT has ever undertaken. A lot of improvements have already come online, and more are going to be coming online each month. And I'm going to attempt to share some of that with you today. So let's see if I can get the slides to advance. Okay, so what I plan to cover is an overall construction status update. I'll also be discussing FDOT's recent announcement updating our project completion plans. And I will also go over what the project is doing to take advantage of reduced traffic volumes while Central Florida deals with coronavirus. And at the end, I'll be glad to take any questions that you may have. So again, a lot of work has occurred since we started construction in 2015. Almost $2 billion worth of construction is on the ground today. During that time, we have dealt with 150,000 to 200,000 cars a day through the corridor, and we've done that construction largely without impacting your commute. And I'd like to point out the travel times there on the right side of your screen compared to what we have today, compared to what we had prior to construction. And you can see in the eastbound direction, it's a little fuzzy on my end as we wait for the resolution to adjust. But in eastbound direction, we're actually seeing an improved travel time. And we believe that that is largely due to the 13 miles of eastbound general use lanes that are already in service and open to the public today. Project employment remains robust. On average, we have 1,300 workers involved with the project on a daily basis. Close to 400 different companies have been involved in one form or another. And our goals for DBE utilization, small businesses, and construction trainees are on track as well. Okay, so again, many improvements are already available to the public, and I'm gonna go through some of those using a series of before and after slides. Starting at the southern end, this is at the Kirkman Road interchange. This is what it looks like before we started, and this is what it looks like today. We put the interchange into final configuration earlier this year. The old left-hand exit was closed and reopened as a more conventional right-hand exit. Just to the north of Kirkman Road interchange, we built the Grand National Drive overpass, which opened in August of 2017 on time. This overpass connects area attractions with hotels, restaurants, and other commercial establishments. A very big deal for this area and the economy. This overpass will also serve as an interchange for the managed lanes when we're complete with the project. Moving to the north end of the corridor up in the Altamont Springs area, this is the what we looked like before construction started and where we are today. So what I'd like to point out is the general use lanes there on the right side of your screen. That's part of the 13 miles of general use lanes that are already open in the eastbound direction. And we're still working on the general use lanes in the westbound. Maitland Boulevard has seen some very dramatic improvements since we started construction. The intersections of Keller Road, Maitland Summit, and Lake Destiny have all been reconstructed as grade separated intersections with the through traffic flying over. That, along with the reconstruction of the Maitland Boulevard interchange, means that traffic passes through this area now without having to stop for signals. Now I'm going to transition to talking about other improvements that are going to be coming online as we move through the summer. I already mentioned the general use lanes in the eastbound direction in the Altamont Springs area. The westbound will be coming online as well as a stretch of the westbound general use lanes in the downtown area from Ivanhoe down to Anderson Street. And that leads us to the interchange with the State Road 408. This is the centerpiece of the project. This interchange handles the majority of the traffic along the corridor. It is the most complicated construction activities, and it is the most costly portion of the project. Roughly 40% of the total project cost is involved in the reconstruction of this interchange. And it will be a complete reconstruction of the original interchange. And you can all remember how that interchange works before we started the project. A lot of congestion, a lot of backups related to those loop ramps. So it's going to be a significant improvement when the new interchange comes online. With that, we'll also be able to reconnect the Griffin Park apartments to the rest of the Paramore neighborhood. So this interchange will represent a huge difference once we're complete, and people are getting very excited about the opportunities that are coming up soon. So the first ramps that will be opening will be the ramps from I-4, both eastbound and westbound, to the 408. Followed later this summer by the ramps from 408 to I-4 westbound. In mid-March, FDOT announced an update to our project completion plans. This plan now includes focusing on completion of the general use lanes and the new ramp connections by early 2021 within the original construction duration. By focusing on the completion of the general use lanes first, the concessionaire will have an additional year to complete the managed lanes. FDOT believes that this is the best plan to serve the nearly 200,000 daily drivers who depend on I-4. Motorists can expect to have an upgraded I-4 main line, complete with enhanced safety features, including full-width travel lanes, outside shoulders, and new ramp connections at 15 interchanges in early 2021. That's less than a year away. With this updated plan, FDOT and the concessionaire settled claims on the project. FDOT agreed to an additional compensation of $125 million to settle claims for unforeseen conditions and issues outside of the control of the concessionaire. Some of these issues included drilled shaft construction difficulties in the downtown area due to unforeseen ground conditions, and additional FDOT required safety reviews prior to opening a bridge over State Road 50, as well as delays related to Hurricane Irma. FDOT will utilize available contingency budgets to cover the additional $125 million. So what does this mean for the project? This strategy enhances safety for both workers and the motorists. Drivers will receive a more reassuring and reliable driving experience sooner with fewer traffic disruptions and temporary lane shifts. Construction of the managed lanes within the median will minimize daily disruptions and provide space for crews to work away from live traffic. This plan will also allow the project team to maximize their resources. So what does this plan mean for Central Florida? It means that the general use lanes will be completed on time. And what are the general use lanes? They are the non-tolled lanes that will handle the majority of the daily traffic even after the managed lanes are completed. They are depicted here between the yellow arrows. Also included with the general use lanes are the new entrance and exit ramps to the project's 15 interchanges. An auxiliary lane connecting to one of those ramps is shown there on the far right. The new general use lanes and interchange ramps will be superior to the interstate before construction began. I-4 was built in the 1960s with different traffic volumes, vehicle types, and average speeds. The new general use lanes will be designed to current standards. Improvements to curves, sight lines, ramp exits, and entrances means that even a rebuilt I-4 general use lane will be a significant improvement to drivers. And we believe that we're already seeing that with the 13 miles of general use lanes in the eastbound direction and what that's and how that's impacting and improving travel time through the corridor. So what does this mean for MetroPlan Orlando and FDOT's local partners? It means certainty about the future. The updated completion schedule gives meaningful improvements by the end of this year with knowledge that the managed lanes will follow a year later. The reported claims and delays have been resolved and the additional compensation will come from available contingency budgets. For the remainder of the project, the contractor will still be held to the same performance standards. And the commitments that the contractor made will be fulfilled. The commitments to landscaping, to aesthetic features, and providing new pedestrian features throughout the corridor, as well as a modernized I-4 will be kept, with all of these improvements being delivered in a time frame that is dramatically shorter than the 20+ years it would have taken with traditional funding and contracting mechanisms. This brings me to the final portion of my presentation. On Saturday, April 11th, Governor DeSantis announced that FDOT would be accelerating significant portions of the I-4 Ultimate project. Specifically, FDOT plans to complete segments of the westbound general use lanes and their connection to the 408 interchange by early summer 2020, which is 1 to 2 months earlier than planned. We will accomplish this by taking advantage of the reduced traffic volumes to close ramps and through lanes on I-4 and even some intersecting roadways to accelerate construction activities. Traffic volumes are starting to increase, but they have been as low as 50% of what we saw before coronavirus. And during this time frame, engineers have been monitoring the traffic conditions and detour routes and making adjustments to those plans as necessary. Some of the initial operations that we announced with this plan include closing of the I-4 westbound on-ramp from State Road 434. This has been under construction now and closed for about a month, and we've got about another 2 weeks to go with this operation. Other operations include weekend closures of State Road 50 to facilitate bridge construction on I-4, as well as a westbound general use lane shift between Amelia and Livingston Street. That's denoted as operation number 3 on your screen. The objective of these operations is to open up more stretches of the westbound general use lanes and complete the connection to the 408 interchange by Independence Day. We've also been taking advantage of the reduced traffic volumes to do lane closures on I-4 main line. We've been doing this since the announcement in April. You'll recall earlier this week that FDOT announced some additional operations that are going to be taking place throughout the remainder of this week and through the weekend. These operations are going to be very impactful to traffic, and we are strongly advising folks to stay away and avoid the area if they can. If they can't, please be aware of alternate routes and detours are going to be necessary to negotiate this area through the weekend. But all of these operations are working in concert over the last month to help us speed up portions of the work so that we can open up additional general use lanes in the westbound direction and the ramps to 408 by Independence Day. So this completes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I want to thank you for that great presentation. This time I'd like to ask the board if they have any questions. Please unmute your microphone. Cynthia, do we have any hands raised?
We do, Mr. Chairman. The first is Commissioner Betsy Vanderlei, and then we also have Mayor Jerry Demings has his hand up as well, and Commissioner Odive. So 3 up.
Mayor Demings.
I have 2 questions. One, have you seen any challenges with having an available workforce to meet the deadlines associated with the construction? And secondly, if you could just review one more time, what's the anticipated completion date for the I-4 Ultimate project?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are great questions. I'll take the first one first. The challenges to the workforce. Yes, there have been some challenges, not just with the I-4 Ultimate contractor, but with all of our contractors in Central Florida, there have been challenges. And I would say that most of the challenges at this point seem to be related to, how can, ensuring that people can come to work while they still have kids at home. That's a challenge for all of us that have kids. But by and large, the workforce on the I-4 Ultimate project is roughly at its same level that it was prior to the outbreak. There has been a few drops or a few percentage point drop in their workforce, but they have largely been able to stay on track. They were initially concerned with what might happen, but their worst fears were not realized. As far as to clarify the completion time for I-4, the general use lanes will be completed by the end of this year. Their deadline is December 31st, 2020. That used to be the deadline for completion of all of the improvements. And that deadline for all of the improvements has been moved out a full year to December 31st, 2021. But again, the general use lanes, which is the majority of the construction work, if you recall, close to $2 billion of this $2.3 billion project has already been, spent and built on the ground. And that's largely been focused on those general use lanes. That's where we're going to get a huge benefit for the traveling public by getting those completed. And those are going to be completed by the end of this year. And then the managed lanes will be the focus of construction for year 2021. And the due date or the deadline for completion of all of the improvements for the project is December 31st, 2021.
Mayor, do you have any follow-up
All right,
questions?
thank you. No follow-up. Thank you.
Okay. Next one would be Commissioner Vanderlei from Orange County. Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Delary. Mr. Tyler, I know that you all have had some unfortunate accidents, and you alluded to some safety improvements as part of the schedule update. And I'm assuming that some of those improvements would be that you can do a lot more work during the day and not at night. But can you touch on some of the things that they enhance safety for workers in this particular plan?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. That's another great question. Your safety is our highest priority for FDOT, and it's the highest priority on this project as well. The number of deaths that we've had on this project is extremely important. Even one is too high a price to pay. All parties involved with this project, and that's just not the DOT, that includes the concessionaire and all of our consultants and subcontracting partners. We have all come together and joined forces to work together for how we can improve safety on this project to prevent future accidents. All parties are working together. The leadership is thoroughly engaged. It's the first thing and the last thing that we talk about whenever we get together. And every single person that's involved in this project, whether they're working for the DOT and our agency, or they're working for the concessionaire and their resources, every single person has an obligation to look out for each other, to see if they see something, to say something, and to work together to look out for each other to improve safety. Specifically for this operation or that I just went over, being able to construct inside the median. Right now we have operations that are in the median, and they're at the interchanges, and they're on the shoulders on both sides. So we're all over the place. And being able to confine the construction operations to a smaller area, a more defined footprint with fewer entrances and exits to the general traffic it has safety improvements. It by nature is a safer environment, and we look forward to getting to that point by the end of this year.
And following on that too, two other items. Number one, are you offering any multilingual information for some of your workers where English may not be their first language, so that they're getting the proper instruction in a language that they understand?
That would be the responsibility of the concessionaire and their contractor, and yes, ma'am, they are.
Okay, good. And then the final question I have for you is, there are a lot of displaced hospitality workers right now. Are you offering any job retraining to possibly give these folks an avenue to get back to work in another field?
I believe the general answer is yes. We have not specifically targeted any particular sector of the economy, but the project team is always hiring. They have an office. One of their field offices is located in downtown Orlando, and that's where they do a majority of their recruitment and their training for any person that's interested in working on the project. And I go back to our employment numbers. We had a very aggressive construction trainee goal for this project, and basically what that is that's where we're bringing people that have never done construction work before, and we're bringing them into this business, and we're showing them how to be an equipment operator, how to be a construction surveyor, and so it's an entire program that's based on teaching people new skills so that they can expand their economic opportunities. And the concessionaire has been committed to that program since the beginning of the project, and we are still committed to it today. So if anyone is interested in working on the I-4 Ultimate project, that would be the place to start first with that local office.
Okay, and if Ms. Taylor could possibly send us a link that we could push out. I've got a lot of displaced hospitality workers in my district in particular that I'd love to be able to give them an opportunity to connect if that's their desire and get back to work. And then the final thought is just thank you for the acceleration of the 408 I-4 interchange. As you know, that is part of my commute. So I'm happy to hear that that's moved up. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We now move on to Commissioner Uribe from Orange County.
Good morning, Mr. Tyler, and thank you for all of that information. It was I was excited to hear today. I do have two questions. One, I know that as we are zeroing in on final dates and things are happening, there's a lot of transition that's happening between exits and entries and things being closed down. Is there a way on top of knowing, there's a major exit on Orange Blossom Trail to I-4 that's currently closed, to kind of get more of a timetable that we can help disperse this information out in the community of expectation of time, not only just, that this is going to be down and so forth like that?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And the best resource for that is our website, i4ultimate.com. All of these operations that we have done since the beginning of construction are posted out there with their schedules. Upcoming operations are posted out there. The detour routes are posted out there. Over the last several weeks, as we've been trying to accelerate to take advantage of the reduced traffic volumes, we've been accelerating everything. So we've been planning quicker, still doing things safely and responsibly, but we are doing the most aggressive job that we can to take advantage of the opportunity that's available to us to advance the work. So that has resulted in some shorter notice than we normally provide, but this is just a temporary period. While we accelerate what we can, we will be going back to our normal regular business practices very, very soon, and so the notice will be out there. It'll be shared with local media, and the i4ultimate.com website is the best place to go to find out what we have coming up in the future.
And my last question, I have received two inquiries regarding two of your concessionaire companies with some complaints of labor. How is the best way to get this information to you or to the appropriate body when it's dealing with the bottom subcontractors that are involved in this?
Yes, you can forward that information to me or to my office. I can give my contact information to the MetroPlan staff, and they can get it out. We have in my office a group that focuses on labor compliance and monitoring and oversight. So we can investigate those and take them to their logical conclusion. In some cases, that also involves the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor, but they can forward that to my office, to my attention, and we will address it.
Thank you, and thank you again for all the updates.
Thank you. The next person would be Commissioner Christine Moore from Orange County.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Delary. Mr. Tyler, I echo my colleagues' praise of how the project is going. And so soon I will always be off of US 441 and back onto I-4, so we look forward to that day. My folks up in the Lockhart area, we had been hearing some initial discussion of plans to do flyovers through that region. And of course, the Seminole County folks might be interested as well because we border Orange and Seminole. Can you give any more details as to where we are in that process and any thoughts you have about that plan, particularly in terms of timing and timeline?
Yes, thank you. Quite frankly, I'm at a loss I'm not exactly sure what project that you're referring to.
Okay, I'm sorry. So it is Maitland, I didn't say that very well, Maitland Avenue going from I-4 to have a complete flyover all the way out to the 429. I had heard from Laura Kelly that there were plans to start that work on Maitland Avenue.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. That definitely helps me better understand it. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information about that. That is a project that I am aware is being considered and being developed, possibly by Florida DOT, possibly by Central Florida Expressway. Unfortunately, I am the construction engineer. I kind of deal with what we're doing and what we're building today, and I don't have a whole lot of information to be able to share with you about that particular project.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Moore?
No, sir.
Thank you. Cynthia, do we have any other raised hands?
We don't have any other raised hands at this time, Mr. Chairman, and no one has entered any questions into the chat box.
Okay. I want to first thank Florida Department of Transportation for this project. It's very much needed. I want to thank them for all their hard work. And I will tell you, it's very impressive to see all the things that are happening. I mean, to move this project as quickly and as efficiently as they're doing, a lot of great work has been done by so many different people. I do have one question. Last week, the Seminole County Fire Department did send a letter to the District 5 Secretary regarding the lack of fire standpipes along the I-4 corridor and was concerned about the safety. And my question is that in his letter, he stated that these standpipes in other areas were put in, like Miami-Dade, Brevard County, Broward County, Palm Beach County, and even a section of Volusia County. And I'm just kind of curious how those areas qualified or was able to put these standpipes in, and the I-4, which is probably one of the busiest roads, if not in the state, in the Southeast, didn't have these standpipes put in. Is there any way you can enlighten me or try to educate me on this thought process?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely. And yes, we did receive that letter. We are in the process of responding to it. And then even in addition to that, we have already scheduled a meeting with the Seminole County Fire Department and Altamont Springs Fire Department staff as well to further discuss this. We do have standpipes and fire suppression measures included in the I-4 Ultimate project. Back before 2015, before we started construction, when we were preparing the scope of this project and preparing for the procurement of the concessionaire, we met with all of the local fire officials along the corridor to help them understand and give us feedback on what the scope of the fire suppression system should be. So we did that coordination. Yes, it was a very long time ago. In retrospect, folks have probably changed positions. May not be aware of that full history, but we included fire suppression measures into the project, and we're currently building those measures today. So that includes standpipes. It includes portals through the noise walls to ensure that that hoses can be run through those walls back to the fire hydrants. So you mentioned what's being done elsewhere around the state, and that is a very good thing to point out. And managed lanes facilities like I-4 Ultimate, they are relatively new to the state of Florida. And so over the last 5+ years, since we started those initial conversations about what should we do on this project and to what we're building today, there has been continued evolution. There's been other projects around the state, and there's been continued evolution in the thinking about what fire suppression should be provided. DOT's standards have evolved during that time frame. So I guess where I'm going with my response is it makes perfect sense to sit back down with the folks that are going to have to manage this system as we move to completion, to reopen that conversation and make sure that everyone is satisfied with what we are going to be building. And if we need to make modifications to what we are building, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Thank you. I do appreciate you and your willingness to meet with the staff and the fire department on this. But just for the record, the conversation actually started in 2013, and there's actually documentation that actually does that, asking for this. But what they're really concerned about is the express lanes, because presently, from what I understand, I may be wrong, that their real concern is with the express lanes getting first responders, not just in and out of that area and residents in and out of it, but the ability to put fires out and or hazardous material. And it could result in closing down of all of I-4 just to get to those express lanes. So I'll be curious to see what the end result would be. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of it, that this issue is common up and down the Central Florida corridor. So thank you. Any other questions from the board? Cynthia, any other raised hands?
We have one question in the chat box from our TAC chairman, Mr. Muhaisen. He wants to know, what were the top 3 challenges that you faced during construction aside from maintaining a safe environment? And then I believe Gary also has a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In maintaining mobility, and basically maintaining the ability for the community to continue doing what the community does. And it's not just traffic, it's not just vehicles, it's pedestrian movements, it's bus, it's allowing for making provisions to allow special events and local events to continue. The amount of special events that occur in Central Florida is there's almost something going on every single weekend. So keeping people moving and keeping people going to where they want to go while we undertake the largest construction project that we've ever undertaken, that is a daily challenge. And I think we're doing an excellent job of that. But yeah, that would be my answer. It's maintaining the cars and vehicles, maintaining the pedestrians, and maintaining the access to all of the special events that occur throughout our community.
Okay, thank you. Gary Hutman, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, Chairman DeLaury, thanks. Just a comment to Commissioner Moore's question about the Maitland Avenue connection to 429. I just took note of that, Commissioner Moore, and I will get an answer for you and send that directly to you.
Thank you, Gary. See no other questions, we're going to move on. If there's no objections, we'll now move on to the public comments. If any members of the public wishes to comment, please raise your hand on the computer or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We'll unmute your mic and then you'll be recognized. Please state your name and address for the record. You'll be limited to 2 minutes. Cynthia, is anyone that'd like to speak on general comment items?
I don't see any raised hands, Mr. Chairman, but we did have one comment previously submitted by Joanne Canellis. She wants to make sure that you all know that she wants 24-hour bus service 7 days a week, and that's including weekends. So Joanne is following us virtually as well.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate your consistency on this matter. It's very much needed. Seeing no public comments, I want to announce that, sorry, Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, I did have one comment I wanted to make, and I couldn't find the raise my hand button. But okay. I just sadly, I wanted to report that, we had our sales tax initiative that we were advancing throughout the last year. And I made a decision that we would suspend any effort in 2020 to put that initiative on the ballot while we still have some significant challenges as it relates to our transportation infrastructure. I did not think that given the environment that we currently find ourselves in with this pandemic, that the timing was right to move forward. And so because of the statutory requirements, if we don't advance it during the year of a general election, then we would not be able to advance it under the current law during a midterm election year. So unless something changes with the legislature, we will not bring it back until 2022. And I know that my staff put a lot of staff hours into the effort in partnership with a number of different community organizations, including MetroPlan, to try to advance that to the ballot. And so, I just want to say to the full board, we do appreciate your efforts to support us. We did several hundred different community presentations within the last year, trying to get the football across the goal line for November this year. But we had to do an audible, and so you will likely see it come back in some form in 2022. I am not going to abandon the efforts associated with improving our overall transportation system here within our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I would commend you and your commissioners for your hard work on that, as well as your staff. The effort was truly amazing, and you should be complimented on your efforts. So sorry it didn't move forward. Any other comments from board members? Cynthia, do we have any hands raised?
Yes, we do have Mayor McDonald.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to echo Mayor Deming's comments. I don't know that this necessarily even waits to 2022. So when the opportunity arises, it's going to become again, if not us, who, if not now, when. It's time to make that happen. If we need to get with the legislature to accommodate that, that's certainly something to consider. Thanks again, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments from the board? Cynthia, any raised hands?
I don't see any other hands, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, June 10th. At this point, not sure, will it be virtual or in person? MetroPlan Orlando will be in touch to provide information on how to sign in if it's held virtual. At this time, with no further comments, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.